Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India. Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
In this session, we are going to look at international human resource management. That means, after this session, you will be able to identify how inter-country differences affect the human resource management practices. You will also be able to recognize the factors which affect the business and management internationally, and we will also going to discuss the different indices to understand more about those factors. So, the factors are economic, social, and legal factors. There are some indicators and there are some typology as well as the indices using which we can understand the differences across the nations about those factors. So, that is what we are going to discuss. We are also going to discuss the challenges of international business, how international business evolves, how multinational organizations evolve, and the relative challenges about HR function also evolve with the evolution of organization from domestic to global level. We will specifically look at staffing, training, performance appraisal, compensation related issues in the international human resource management practices. We will explain with examples how to implement a global human resource management program and what are the major incentives given to the managers who go for the international assignment. When we talk about international human resource management, generally there are three broad schools of thought, and this is understood, studied under the three broad categories. First is cross cultural management, wherein we look at the differences caused in HRM processes in systems across cultures. So, how in different societies and cultures HR system varies. Comparison of those variation is studied in the comparative HRM, and international HRM also looks at HR issues in multinational enterprises or what we say global organizations. Why international HRM matters we can understand by these simple two facts. According to the 2006 assessment, approximately 1 lakh multinational enterprises are operating with 9 lakh affiliates, where there are millions of employees working across the nations, and there are and the number of expatriates is in lakhs if not crores. India in last few years also has been a vibrant space from where many multinational corporations have originated. At the same time, India is also a place where world's some of the leading MNEs, multinational corporations, are functioning. So, in view of these facts, it is essential for us to understand how the nature of HRM changes, or what are the peculiarity about the HRM function, HRM systems, as we go from domestic to international level of HRM, or we go from localized national firms to transnational and global firms. There are three dimensions which are studied in the international HRM. First we study HR activities, how the procurement, allocation, utilization of human resources takes place across the cultures or across the economies. Types of employees, what are the peculiarity, what are the special challenges, what are the speciality about the three different type of employees, because in M&Es we have home country employees, parent company employees and trans company employees. Different categories of employees have different challenges, all the categories are important for special purposes, special assignments. So what are their issues and how to handle, how to tackle those issues are studied in the in this dimension of types of employees. We also look at the mode of internationalization. All M&Es are not global corporations, some of them are export units. That means in the parent company main office and main organization functions, and in order to export its product it opens offices across countries. So the autonomy and the manpower available in those offices is limited. Most of the policies about the production, marketing are decided by the parent company office. Transnational operations, when the organizational activity grow from not only to export but also manufacturing, procurement, sourcing related activities, then we can say that organization moves from export oriented unit to transnational operational unit, whereas wherein the parent company may import some material from its international office, from its international sites. Parent company may also allocate some activities, production activities in the international sites. They may also do the licensing work, they may also do the production related to the by using the licensing mechanism or lease mechanism in the different countries. And then comes the global operations, wherein organization look at its operation spread across the globe as one integrated process, and looking at wherever is the best market and best resources are available, they make their policies about the material, about the talent, about technology, about doing different production processes on different sites. You can take example of currently we are talking about the vaccines. So Covaxin, which is developed, which is the product developed by AstraZeneca in Britain, it is being produced in India, but it is contributed by raw materials or intermediary product manufactured in at least 15 other countries. So in order to produce that vaccine in India, Indian company has to import at least 17 items to assemble those and give a complete manufacturing process of the Covishield in India. That is true with many I think most of the products, whether you take mobile phones or you take any electronic gadget, many time the vehicles, you see the parts, different components are being coming from various parts of the world, and Indian market also contributes in manufacturing, but they also import lot of raw material and lot of components from the other market. So when corporation reaches to that level wherein they look at their operations in the globally integrated way, then we can call them the global operations or the global organizations. Role of HRM in multinational organization is understood to have the 3 models. This is similar to the role of HRM. We studied the Ulrich's typology about people and process orientation, and we discussed in the very first session about the different roles of HR like strategic partner, change agent, administrative expert. On the similar lines, role of HRM in the international context or role of HRM in the global or international organization can be understood in 3 ways, or we can also say that HRM plays these 3 distinct roles in international firms. What are those roles? Those are the role of a builder, of a change agent, and of a navigator. Builder means the role of HRM here is about building the foundation of different processes, recruitment, appraisal, training and development, salary and compensation, having sound foundation of the HR process. That is the first requirement for HR function to contribute to the business organization. Here the focus happens to be internal coherence, meaning our job analysis, recruitment process, performance appraisal process, salary administration process, they should be coherent with each other. They should informed by each other. For example, there has to be a good job description process. That job description should contribute to creating the good performance appraisal form. That performance appraisal form must also have the development and learning needs. Development and learning need data must feed to the training and development system to orchestrate the good T&D system in the organization, and data on the job analysis and job description also should inform recruitment process and salary administration process. Recruitment process, it is important because it is only because HR can function efficiently on the recruitment process only if they clearly know what are the competencies are required for the in the new recruit, and that we come to know by looking at good job analysis, which is thorough, which is detailed, which is also modified with time and as per the need of organization and environmental challenges. So, here the role of HR is to have sound HR processes with internal coherence across the country. So, internal fit is the biggest concern in this role of HR. HR also has to play the role of change agent, that is about responding and adjusting to changes from the environment. Environment is changing constantly, economic factors, legal and political factors, technological environment, these all are changing. They are constantly redefining the business processes and business models both. If you look at the current IBM CEO survey, it is found that preventing business model from the disruption or developing new business model for its own business, these are some of the foremost challenges of business leaders. So, that change is always going on. HR need to be the change agent wherein it can help the human resources which can help the employees to be ready for the imminent changes in the environment. Here the focus happens to be of the internal fit as well as external fit. Then comes the role of navigator. That is particularly true in the international context of HRM. In one, you can understand by looking at 2 terms which are very common in the strategic management literature also. One is ambidexterity, another is dynamic capability. Dynamic capability suggests that the competitive advantage of any organization has a limited shelf life. It can change, it generally changes, and these days because of the open trade and technological evolution, the average life of competitive advantage is only decreasing. So, in light of that, organization has to keep developing the new capability, and that is the dynamic capability view. In the international HRM, it becomes very complicated because different markets operate at different level of maturity. Because of that, different sets of capabilities are required for an organization to have different capabilities. So, the organizations need to have different capabilities when they are operating in different markets, or you can say the organizations, the units of the M&Es which are operating in different markets need to have different capabilities, because the maturity of the markets in those nations, the taste of the customers, their purchasing power, all these are different. So, organization, the centralized HR, the corporate HR need to appreciate that and help the units functioning in different countries to identify the appropriate set of capability and develop that in that particular country. Then comes another term which is ambidexterity. Ambidexterity means the capability of seemingly contradicting capabilities. That means ability to look at the details and ability to have the big picture. Now, these two distinct capabilities sound contradictory, but senior managers have to have both of these. Similarly, organizations also have to deal with these contradictory demands arising in different environment because of its dynamic nature. For example, organization should be able to look at what are the systems, what are the processes which should be centralized to save the cost, because there are certain processes, if they are done well centralized in the centralized manner, it can save lot of cost. At the same time, they also need to know what are the processes should be handed over, should be what are the processes which can be delegated to the regional offices. How much centralized decision making should be done, how much decentralization in the decision making should be done, how much standardization of the processes should be done, how much empowerment and the democracy should be adopted to choose the appropriate systems and processes. So, these are the special capabilities which are required sometime to operate in different markets and also sometime to operate in the same market. That ambidexterity is most difficult to develop, and that is where the role of HR becomes even more important, because they can help organization, they can help the business leaders to communicate the expectations in the lucid manner to the employees, so that they do not confuse. When top management says that you need to have capability of following the structure, following the standards, and you have to be innovative and creative at the same time, managers and employees should not be confused. They need to be explained in what context centralization, following the centralized process is important, in which kind of situation innovation and creative thinking is important. That role can be played by HR, and HR is perhaps best placed to communicate these demands in the language which employees can understand. So, that is the navigational or navigator's view of international HRM. Now, we will look at what are the challenges in front of business in order to manage globally. These challenges in conventional textbooks are divided as economic challenges, political, legal, social and cultural differences. In last few decades, institutional theory has gained a lot of traction, and it is being recognized being a very important lens for the management. What institutional theory says is that instead of looking at country as a whole, and instead of looking at economic factor, political factors, and as they are influencing different systems and processes in the society or in an economy, we can understand the we can understand any country, we can understand any market better by looking at the institutional maturity. Institutions are the entities which can be very conspicuous, which can be very evident. For example, Supreme Court is an institution, or labor law is a certain kind of institution, institutions related to telecom policies. So, some of these institutions are very evident, they can be understood very clearly. There are some explicit description and explicit nature of these institutions is evident, whereas some institutions are implicit, they are cultural in nature, where you do not see the written documents about the nature and function of those institutions, but they are very important in any society. So, for example, family system in India, or community or caste system in India, or different religions, different societal groups, these are also the institutions which may not be very explicit, but may not be very tangible, but they are part of the culture and they influence all other systems including business systems. So, by definition, as research Scott, the famous organizational sociologist, has given, institutions are those which have cognitive, means we can make sense about that, normative, means which have certain acceptable norms about what should be done, what should not be done, and the regulative structures. So, state, market, family, religion, corporation, profession and community, these are the recognized institutions in the institutional theory. So, we can look at factors which affect the international HRM from these economic, political, legal, social and cultural factors. We can also understand international HRM in terms of the institutional maturity. So, so the economies, countries having high institutional maturity will be the places where doing business is easier, you can enforce the contract, and in the countries where the institutions are weak, it may be easy, it may be difficult to set up the business and conducting the business. We will look at these factors one by one. Economic factor, that is about differences in economic system. Some economies are more open, some economies are less open, some economies are more towards capitalism, wherein ownership of the capital, promotion of the entrepreneur, ownership of the property rights, these are well accepted and are given to the citizens of the country, or citizens coming, or the businesses coming from different from the outside companies. So, there are different types of economies, some are open and some are less open economies. Open economies means there is an openness for ownership of the property right or doing business, or there can be lack of openness about starting certain businesses, having stringent regulations, more reporting requirement or licensing requirements. So, when we have these kind of institutions, when we have these kind of situation, we can say that economy is not very open. There can be a planned open economy where it is very strong, it is open but also very strongly regulated, as we see in the economies of China. Then there are examples of mixed economies where there is a socialism as well as capitalism are the valued goals, and on certain matter government is more stringent, regulations are more stringent. On certain businesses, or for the businesses in the certain with the certain which are primarily owned by certain sections of society, there is more stringency or less stringency. So, in those economies countries try to maximize the welfare as well as capital formation. That is the nature of the mixed economy. I will not be presenting the different list of the countries which are more open or closed, but I will be sharing two indicators. Using those two indicators, you can yourself understand which economy is more open and which economies are less open. So, one index is called as openness index, and another index we will discuss is ease of doing business index. Openness index is an economic metric calculated as the ratio of countries' total trade, that is the sum of the export plus import to the country's gross domestic product. So, the higher the index, higher the openness index, larger the influence of trade on the domestic activities. So, if openness index is high, the openness of economy will be considered to be higher. Another index which is more functional in nature, means which can give more idea for corporations which are trying to start or establish business in different economies, different countries. That indicator is ease of doing business index. You might have heard about ease of doing business index and how India's position has improved in last 3-4 years regularly. Still it is not in the top quartile, but this is one indicator even the government of India has recognized is very important to open up the economy, so that more and more international firms can come, so that more and more Indian firms can also internationalize. So, ease of doing business index include 10 different parameters like starting a business, dealing with construction permit, electricity availability, property registration, credit availability from the that is connected to the maturity of the banking system, protecting minority investor, that is how the capital market regulator is functional, are they well functioning or not so well functioning, paying taxes, what is the tax system of that country, trading across borders, what are the regulatory framework and permissions etc. required for trading across border, contract enforcement and resolving insolvency. You might have noticed that for the resolving insolvency and the fast accelerated redressal of the insolvency cases, there has been a regulation in last 2 years which was implemented in India. So, these are the indicators to look at to what extent economy is open for business. Economies which are open for business are the easier places where organizations can hire the employees, recruit them, purchase the office space or take the office space on lease, starting their production unit. All these things become easier if ease of doing business index is higher in a country. If it is lower in a country, all the processes of starting a business, running a business, hiring manpower, starting production capacity, all those are more stifled in different stages. Second factor is political. We have very varied kind of political nature of different economies. We have democracy. Within the democracy, we have different forms of democracy. In some countries there is bi-party system. There are some countries where parties and personalities are very close to each other. There are some centralized political economies like again China, where there is only one party. There are some monarchies in some Gulf countries, or Saudi Arabia is an example of monarchy, and their regulation is based on Sharia, and most of the regulations have to be approved by the monarch. Then there are confederation of monarchies like United Arab Emirates. That United Arab Emirates is the confederation of the 7 monarchies. Dubai is one of them. So, we have different kind of the political nature of economies, political nature of countries, and the political nature also decides what are the kind of institutions there in the country, whose permission is key to start the business, who we have to convince or who makes the regulations, who is the appellate authority if organization is facing any problem in operating their business. All these are affected by the nature of political system in that country. To understand the political factors, we can look at human freedom index. Human freedom index is index developed by Cato Institute that gives rating to different countries on these parameters like rule of law, security and safety, movement, religion, association, assembly and civil society, expression and information, identity and relationship, size of government, legal system and property rights, access to sound money, freedom to trade internationally, regulation of credit, labor and business. So, human freedom index gives us idea if we need to look at which company where we should internationalize. This is one of the indicators we must look at that tells about the political system and stability of particular country. Then comes the legal system. Legal system varies, legal system about the taxation, about the penal codes as well as labor laws, they can vary across countries. HR need to be mindful of that because staffing process, performance appraisal process, salary administration all will be dependent on the labor laws of that country. We are going to look at and we are going to have a brief discussion only on the labor laws, and if you look at this slide you will come to know how varied labor laws can be, and you will also look at how across the countries employee entitlement and employee rights also vary, and that is very well captured in the labor rights index. Labor rights index captures the data from 115 countries. Wage Indicator Foundation is the main body which comes up with the labor right index, and when they looked at the labor rights and when we compare the labor rights across the country, we find some interesting observations. For example, in Canada employees have less than 3 weeks of the annual leave, which is much lesser than what is available in India. In Guinea employee receive 30 paid vacation days. So, it is beyond the sick leave or earned leave, it is the vacation leave that too fully paid. In Bulgaria the maternity leave happens to be of 58 weeks for the new mothers, whereas in US there is no right to the new parents for the paid time off. Companies, organizations can give it as per their discretion, but there is no central law about it. The index shows that 43 out of 115 countries maximum working hours and overtime is 57 per week, that is in the 43 countries. But if you look at Thailand, there the extended hours including overtime hours can go up to 84 weeks. In Kenya the general working hours are 52, whereas same general working hours in a week is acceptable to the level of 35 in France. Cambodia employees have the record of 27 public holidays, whereas in Tunisia there are only 6 public holidays. There are 38 countries where employees have the right for a strike. You might recall the Industrial Dispute Act and Trade Union Act in India give employees right for a strike by following some norms, whereas in in rest of the 77 countries the right to strike is either fully prohibited or very severely restricted. So, you can look at the legal framework also changes across the country. Accordingly, HR systems also need to change. If business organization is starting their processes, starting their operations in different countries, they need to be mindful of these different legal requirements. Then comes the cultural difference. The most popular cultural difference framework is given by Hofstede. Hofstede has actually used this framework to distinguish the culture across countries. This framework was given by two anthropologists in the 50s. Hofstede used this framework, developed the items, developed the questions to unravel the attitude of the employees on these 5 parameters, and based on that data, and this data was collected in the IBM company. He was the very senior manager in the IBM. At that time IBM was operating in 80 countries. He collected data from 80 countries on these parameters, and he found that different countries, irrespective of the nature of the employee, the qualification etc. was same, employees from different countries used to vary very significantly on these parameters. So, based on that he highlighted that how culture is the societal culture is the source of the differences in the organizational culture, and he also gave a very vivid picture about the difference in the societal culture on these parameters. Some organizations are high power distance, they are the and some societies are high power distance society where the different hierarchical levels have much higher difference in terms of the accessibility of the people in the lower hierarchy to reach out to the higher person in the higher levels of hierarchy. Likewise, there are lot of differences we can understand based on this framework. What we are going to though present in more detail is not Hofstede study, though it is perhaps the most famous or the most popular study about the cultural differences. I was particularly impressed by another classification given by Erin Meyer. Erin Meyer developed this classification primarily in the organizational context. Certainly these elements are drawn from the societal culture, but they beautifully capture the differences in the organization culture as well. In this graph you can see Israel and Russia, they are mapped across different across 8 parameters. These 8 parameters, which she calls the elements of the cultural map, they are common, and based on these 8 factors we can distinguish the different cultures. First is communication, that is a low context communication or high context communication. Low context communication meaning the subtleties are less, and whatever is to be conveyed, most part of it is conveyed verbally, whereas the high context communication style is found to be in collectivist society where long term relationship persists, and communication as much as it happens through verbal means, communication also happens through body language, through gestures, through the subtle norms being followed in the interactions. So, these are the high context communication. Nature of giving feedback also differs across culture. For example, generally it is generally accepted, and Meyer has given this example in her book, the French managers generally give the cultural norm amongst the French managers and employees, and it is coming from the French society, is that negative feedback is given in the public and positive feedback or appreciation is given in the private, whereas in USA it is totally opposite. Negative feedback is given in private and positive feedback is given in public. And when these two managers or the employees from these two culture work, initially if they are not aware of this cultural norm or cultural practice, that can create some misunderstanding amongst them. Similarly, persuading happens differently in different cultures. In some cultures, principle is first spoken and based on that persuasion is done, whereas in some cultures which are generally high context cultures, we have to pursue people based on what will happen when they take certain stance, or what happens if they hold certain opinion or make certain kind of decision. So, application is first discussed and then principle is discussed, whereas in some cultures principle is discussed before the application of persuasion, about persuasion. Leading, in some countries egalitarian, more equal footing is given to people who are leaders and who are the followers, whereas in some cultures the leaders are put on much higher pedestal socially or according to the norms of the interaction. Decision, in some countries like Japan, the consensus is valued a lot, whereas in some countries people are more comfortable in doing top down decision making. So, in Australia and in Saudi Arabia, we see more preference for the top down decision making in comparison to very consensual based decision making in Japan. Trusting, in some cultures is more on task based. So, you can trust a manager or a person for a particular task, or as the task changes, whom you trust can also change, whereas in some cultures which are generally collectivist culture, trust is relationship based. So, whether person is the best fit for that particular task or not, I end up giving him that responsibility if I am in good relationship with that person. Disagreeing, in some cultures open confrontation is more welcome, whereas some cultures, particularly East Asian cultures and to some extent Indian culture, they also avoid direct confrontation. Scheduling, that becomes very evident when there are multicultural project teams, because in some cultures the linear time is considered for the scheduling, whereas in some cultures there is much more flexibility in decision about time. So, when the appointment is booked, if it is a Nordic culture, if the appointment is at 10 o'clock, most likely the person is supposed to reach 5 minutes before 10. In US, it is expected person should reach about a minute or so before 10 o'clock. In India, we say okay, we will meet at 10, and plus minus 10 minutes is not looked down upon very. So, 10-minute delay or even 10 minutes delay in India is not looked down upon so severely. So, we can look at how the different cultures promote certain different type of dispositions about certain behavior, which are very prominent, which are very important to be understood at the workplace. This graph is given comparing the Israel and Russia. This graph is also taken from the Aaron Mayer's book on the culture map. It says that Russia and Israel are very similar in being communication context in terms of giving the direct negative feedback, but they are very opposite in terms of decision making or in terms of leadership. So, these things have to be understood by HRM to set up the systems and processes in different cultures. Combination of various cultural and institutional factors are shown in the business system approach. I would like to share business system approach. Most of it is developed on the writings of Whitley, and Redding is the one who has developed this nice framework referring extensively to the Whitley's writings, that talks about how we can understand a business system as the crust of larger institutional framework that includes culture as well. So, we need to understand the business system, and the first part, the top 3 blocks, the top 3 elements are business systems, the most apparent aspect of the business system, like ownership, coordination, non-ownership or coordination, employment, work management. These are the most evident aspect of business system. They are embedded in the financial capital, human capital and social capital. Financial capital is availability of money, human capital is availability of skill and talent, social capital is the trust in the society, trust in the governance, trust amongst the people, amongst themselves. So, these 3 are the things where business system is embedded. These 3 are constantly influenced by the cultural element of the society, but culture do not directly results into business system. Culture also do not directly results into institutional fabric. For culture to result into institutional fabric, we need to understand 2 more very important factors: governance and nature of civil society. If civil society is very proactive, governance is welfare oriented, you will have a different kind of institutional fabric emerging in that society. But if the civil society is not coherent, is not proactive, there is much more infighting in the civil society, and if government is not welfare, but it is rent seeking, extracting kind of government, then you will have very different kind of institutional fabric emerging from the similar culture. So, we need to understand that culture is not only the factor. So, any society can have very glorious culture, can have lot of good knowledge systems available in the culture, can have lot of good things in the culture, but those good things will not result into a business system, they will not result into institutional framework directly. It is the nature of governance and the existing nature of civil society which affects the institutional fabric, which in turn affects the business system. So, if I have to understand the international HRM, I cannot only look at the culture of that country, I need to look at government, civil society, institutional fabric as well about that particular country, and accordingly policies have to be decided. These 2 sets of factors or these 3 sets of the layers, they are connected by material logics about the price, technology, task contingencies, etc. They are also affected by ideational logic of culture, definition of order value preference, and these aspects of the society. So, this is a total business system framework, 3 layered framework which are connected by government and nature of civil society, and that can be the excellent background about looking at how different factors are influencing each other and how their interplay results into the specific nature of business system. International organizations or global organizations can be ethnocentrically oriented, polycentric oriented. Global companies, expect versus locals, that kind of stance can also be taken by international organizations. Ethnocentric organizations are those which tend to staff its positions abroad with the employees from its headquarter, from its parent company. Polycentric companies are those which staff the positions abroad with the local or host country. Global companies are those which aim to attract the best candidates globally, including freely using third country nationals to staff its positions around the world with the best people available. Expect versus local choice is always live in the organizations which are going on the path of internationalization, not just, and that is not just between the expatriate versus local employees. There are also the commuter solutions, how long expatriate should be staying, from where we can have the expatriates. These questions are more nuanced question beyond the polycentricism and ethnocentrism, which any organization has to decide upon. This slide explains this point in few more words. Whether organization is following ethnocentric or polycentric approach, there remains to be three key competencies for managers who are going to operate in the international HRM field. Those competencies are tolerance for ambiguity, resilience and curiosity. Tolerance of ambiguity is important because certain things might be happening in certain way, and if they are not according to our expectation, our world view, so the managers have to have the patience to talk to the other stakeholders or the members of the host country to fully understand that. Resilience is required in the international management, international HRM, because in spite of all the caution in the international HRM, some misunderstanding can happen, or there can be sudden change in the regulatory, political or economic environment. If organization is committed for internationalization, managers need to have the resilience to face the failure, learn from those failure and getting back to the drawing board or getting back to the field. Curiosity is the third key competency, because in the international operations, if manager is not curious, the person will try to fit everything within his or her very dynamic in very different way. If I am not already exposed to the ways of functioning and ways of institutional functioning, ways of the cultural nature of interaction, if I am not aware of those, I need to have the curiosity to understand. It is only by understanding I can sail through, or a manager can conduct the business in the different culture. So curiosity is important because that makes people constantly learn new things or understand new things about the different culture or about the same culture. Training and development is very essential and very crucial in the international HRM. Training has to be imparted to the people before they go for the international assignments. Training should be ongoing during their international assignments. They must be given, and the training must include code of ethics applicable in that particular country. Cross cultural training is essential so that managers can quickly build their relationship in the international, in the outside country. With growing interest in the self-directed learning, and in the COVID times that is further increasing, we need to create the opportunities and resources for the managers to go for self-directed learning. How to set the team level ground rules, how to communicate about the workflow, how to use technology inclusively, These all are important element of training and development for any successful international HRM operation. Particularly in the COVID time, support practices should be extended to help mitigating the stress, and that can be done by webinars on resilience, tutorials on mindfulness or other yoga or contemplative practices which can help people to de-stress. Employee assistance program, virtual counseling services are becoming more and more important in the time of COVID-19. These stress mitigating offerings are even more helpful for people who are not only in the international operations, but also leading the virtual teams. So, training and development is a very important aspect for IHRM to be successful. Then comes performance appraisal system. Performance appraisal can be very tricky for the international managers. We need to take care of the cultural differences, what is to be conveyed, how to be conveyed, all these are the things which are affected by the cultural norms that must be understood properly before going for the performance appraisal meeting. Who does the appraisal is also very important, because expatriates, the managers or employees coming from parent company working in the foreign company, they need to be communicated who is their boss, because in almost all the cases they have two supervisors, one in the parent company, another one on site or on the host country site. Who is the supervisor, who should be doing the appraisal, who should be appraising on what aspect of appraisal, all these things are tricky and should be decided according to the nature of the job, should be decided consciously. Organizations need to identify how to go for the evaluation of the performance. Will the evaluation of the performance of an employee will be totally based on the host companies or host countries format, or it will be mixed, or expatriates evaluation, performance evaluation will be done according to the parent company's format, because that is the format with which he or she has been familiar to. So, this is again another policy issue which must be decided according to the role and the nature of job given to the expatriate, given in the international setting. One thing is found in most of the studies is that former expatriates can be very good source of information about evaluation and performance appraisal of the managers who are expatriates, who are working in the multinational setting outside, particularly outside their parent company. Salary of expatriates can be decided primarily on two approaches. One is balance sheet approach. So, while deciding the salary of the expatriates, purchasing power is the factor considered, and according to the purchasing power of that particular currency in the host country, salary is decided. That is called balance sheet approach. A split pay approach is paying half the person's actual pay in home country currency and half in the local currency. Incentives are almost norms to be given to the people who are gone for the international assignments. Incentives can be foreign service premiums, hardship allowance or mobility premium. Foreign service premiums are the financial payment over and above the regular base pay. Generally it is 10 to 30% of the base pay. Hardship allowance is given to the managers or employees who are gone out of their host country to work in the foreign country where life situations are particularly tough, and because of the hard living and difficult working condition, allowances are given. Then we also give mobility premium. Typically it is a lump sum payment given to the employee as a reward for moving from the parent company parent organization, its native country to the foreign country for foreign assignments. Last but not the least, expatriation, last but not the least, it is not only tricky to manage the expatriates and sending people for the international assignments, and we just looked at how the different HR processes have to be geared up for the international operations. Repatriation is also equally important. Many organizations have good policy for expatriations, but do not have good policies and framework for the repatriation. Repatriation means employee coming back after his or her international assignment to the parent company or to the parent country or native country of from where he had gone for that assignment. Repatriation is important because employee who has got exposure to the international market, international outside, he has got the exposure in the economy different from his parent country's economy, that gives that employee lot of exposure, ideas and experience about his job. Assignment as an expatriate also result into knowledge and reflection about one's own company. If they are not inducted properly, company will lose that knowledge and experience which that employee generally gathers when he or she is on the international assignment. So, organizations need to set up the processes for the steps of the repatriation. Simplest thing is they must value the expatriate's experience, they must identify the appropriate role for the expatriates when he comes back to the native country, that can help the person to stay with the organization, and in this process organization can be benefited by his experience and knowledge which most of the expatriate gets by virtue of working in altogether different market.